Said, I'll go down as the greatest president in history. And then he blew it. He said, I'm not sure if I put him above Washington or Lincoln. So I'm not that happy about that, dude.
Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, is here. All right. So he's not there at Washington, Lincoln level yet. Where is he in the Newt Gingrich presidential historian scheme of things?
Well, look, I think he's at least tied with Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who won 4 presidential elections, led America during World War II, and led us through the Great Depression. So considering that Trump really in this second term, he hasn't even got a full year under his belt, and he's already in that league. And I think, frankly, given another year or two, he'll rank third. I mean, nobody's going to replace Washington. He created the country, and nobody's going to replace Lincoln. He won a civil war and sustained the country. So they're just out of reach. And I like President Trump. I think he's historic. I think it is astonishing what he achieved in the Middle East. I look forward to his next great successes. But both as a historian and just as a friend, I'm not going to tell him something that I don't think is true. I think he has a real shot at becoming number 3 in the pantheon of American presidents, but I don't think there's any likelihood that he will in any way replace either Lincoln or Washington, just because historically the moment they were in was so decisive in shaping us as a country, and hopefully we're not ever going to be in that kind of a moment in the near future.
Wow, and you would put him ahead of Reagan, that means.
Oh, and look, I love Ronald Reagan. I campaigned with him. I served in Congress 8 years while he was president. He defeated the Soviet Empire. He is certainly, I think, the second greatest president in the modern era after Trump. But you look at the scale of change that Trump is pulling off, both at home and abroad, and it's without parallel. And Reagan was a great, great man, and he did things that really profoundly reshaped America. Everything we did when I was Speaker was standing on Reagan's shoulders and implementing Reagan's ideas. But in terms of sheer decisive energy and forcing things to change, I've never seen anything like Trump. And as I said, other than Washington and Lincoln, I can't imagine anybody else who has had the extraordinary effectiveness that Trump has had. And remember, we're still in the first year of his second term.
Yeah, I mean, we could
the next 3 years are going to be
we
like.
could still take Greenland. So there's a lot of runway left, Speaker. The Democrats, though, I don't think history will look too kindly on them and their behavior as of late. How would you analyze their performance?
Well, I don't think there is any such thing as the Democrats. I think you have groups of left-wing cuckoos. You have a handful of groups of rational people. You have, remember, you have in Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, House and Senate leaders. They live 1.1 miles apart, a $15 Uber ride apart in Brooklyn, a city which is about to elect Mamdani as a big government socialist with weird values. Now, that's their world. There's a giant country beyond Brooklyn, and they have no clue what's happening in that country. There's a new poll out in Minnesota, for example, that shows that the Republican nominee, unnamed, is within 3 or 4 points of beating any Democrat who runs. It's Minnesota. And we're seeing this shift all across the country as people, frankly, partly they like Trump, but even more powerfully, they really are getting sick of the Democrats being a party of weirdness, hostility. You know, a guy runs for attorney general in Virginia who desired the death of the Republican speaker and talked positively about the death of his children. I mean, that is a party which is sick. And Spanberger, the candidate for governor, can't even repudiate him. So I think what you have is a sense that these people are really increasingly crazy and increasingly incompetent, and that is shifting people towards the Republican Party, I think, in a very big way.
Well, you think this is crazy. Wait till you see the rest of the show, Speaker. Enjoy yourself. I know Trump enjoyed your presence at the White House. Did he ask you about the tile? Did you weigh in on which tile you like?
No, we didn't get into it. We got into other stuff, and Callista and I were glad to be there. But as always, there's a certain circus effect, if you will,
Yes.
when the president's on a roll.
Yes, always exciting. Thank you so much. Good to see you. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.